With just a £15 Raspberry Pi computer, you can turn your TV into a retro gaming system and play all the games from all the consoles from the 70s, 80s and 90s. With thousands of fantastic classic games to choose from, you'll have hours of retro fun. So, let me show you how. Hi and welcome to Bytes and Bits. Games consoles have been developing since the 1970s, from the very first generation of Pong-style machines, through the classic Atari VCS era, and then on to the Nintendo and Sega wars, and now then with the three-way battle between Sony, Nintendo and Microsoft. Now over that time, literally thousands of great games have been released, many of them now sitting unplayed unless you have an old working console. But emulation is the retro gamer's best friend. With just a very cheap Raspberry Pi, you can turn your TV into any console you want from the 8, 16 and 32-bit eras of the 1970s, 80s and 90s. Add some legally obtained ROM backup files and you can play any game ever written for these fantastic machines. So in this video, we'll take our £15 Raspberry Pi Zero 2 and turn it into a retro console emulation powerhouse. So let's see how it's done. Now for this project, we'll be using the same setup as my Pi Zero arcade emulation setup. Indeed, you can simply add this project onto the end of the other to have all the arcade games and all the console games in one fantastic system. So I'm going to quickly run through the basic setup and installation here. If you want more in-depth instructions, do please have a look at the arcade video. Just leave out the bit where we install the arcade game ROMs. So to get started, you're going to need some components. So the main computer that we'll use is the Raspberry Pi Zero 2. Now this is my favourite Raspberry Pi as it gives us a fully powered Linux PC for only £15, at least here in the UK. And it's about the same power as a Raspberry Pi 3B, so nowhere near as much processing power as one of the latest Pi 5s, but more than enough for what we're going to be using it for. Now on top of this, you'll also need a micro SD card. Now if you're just going to be loading console games, then a 64GB card will be fine, but if you want to install both the arcade games as well, then I'd opt for a 128GB, just to make sure that you've got enough room for all of the ROMs and all of the media files. Now the Pi Zero also uses smaller USB and HDMI connectors, so you're going to need a micro USB to standard USB converter and a mini HDMI to full-sized HDMI port converter. Now if you buy the Raspberry Pi Zero Essentials pack, you'll get all of that all in one nice neat little package. Now after that, you'll need a Raspberry Pi compatible power supply and a game controller. Now I'm using this GameSir G7 Pro as it's a great quality gamepad, but if you do need to keep the cost down, you can use pretty much anything that has a full set of buttons. So by this I mean a D-pad, the 4 main action buttons, a start and select button, and then 2 shoulder buttons. Now as we're only going to be able to emulate up to around about the PlayStation 1 era, you don't actually need any analog controls. So I've got this Super NES style controller which only costs around £6 and that works great for all of the old consoles. So all in all, with all these bits, you're probably looking at around about £30 to get all the parts, again if you don't already have some. So once you've got the parts, we need to build the SD card and get it ready for the Raspberry Pi. So for this project I've been using Batocera, which is a full Linux gaming front end. Now to get this set up, all we need to do is to download the Raspberry Pi Zero 2 disk image from the Batocera website and then flash that onto our SD card. So to do this, you're going to need a flasher application like Etcher or the Raspberry Pi Imager that I'm using here. Now there aren't any special settings that you need, just flash the downloaded image directly onto your SD card and we're ready for action. Again, if you're not sure how to do any of this, then please do refer back to my arcade video setup, which goes through the process in much more detail. So once the SD card is ready, you need to make sure that your Raspberry Pi is not connected to the power. Then you can pop in the SD card. Then connect up the HDMI display, and then connect your game controller using a USB cable or a USB wireless dongle if you have it, but we do need to be connected over USB, at least until we get up and running, because obviously we haven't yet set up our Bluetooth connection. Once that's all connected, you can then just power on the Raspberry Pi and wait for Batocera to boot up. Now this will take a couple of minutes, but you should see the software running through some initialization processes before finally booting up to the main screen. Now at this point, you need to press a button on your controller to get Batocera to recognize it. Then just hold down a button so it can recognize which controller we're going to be setting up, and then it will start the mapping process. So for this, just follow the instructions and press each button on the controller as indicated on the screen. When you get down to the hotkey button, then just press your select button on the controller and we'll set that then as the hotkey. So we're now running Batocera, and you should be able to use your controller to move around the interface. So you can select items using the D-pad, that lets you move around, and then use the south button on your controller, which will be sort of the A button on an Xbox controller or the X button on a PlayStation device. That lets you then select something, and then if you use the east button, that will then let you cancel or go back a menu. So great, we're now ready to go. The next task then is to get some games onto our SD card. Now for this we'll need to connect Batocera to our home network so that it can both access the internet, but also so that we can connect to it from our other computers. So in Batocera, press the Start button to bring up the settings page, then select Network Settings, and then move down and enable Wi-Fi. Now if it looks like nothing has happened, just click the back button and then go back into Network Settings, and you should now see down the bottom that Wi-Fi has been enabled, and there should also be some options to enter your Wi-Fi credentials. So you need to simply go in and enter those credentials. Then once you're connected up, you should be able to come back out to the network settings screen, and you should now see an IP address and host name. Now you do need to make a note of these, as we're going to need them in a while. So we've got everything set up. We now need to jump back onto our normal computer. So to play games, we need some game ROM files. Now these are the actual code dumps from the original game cartridges. So using these means that we'll be playing the original games exactly as they were released on our Raspberry Pi. Now these files are scattered around the internet, so you'll need to track them down, but try searching for ROM downloads or for a ROM megathread. So I'm going to assume that you have done that and you've gone out and found some ROMs. Now do make sure you do check the legality of what you're doing. So these files will all be under copyright somewhere. And now I did make a video on retro gaming copyright rules, so please do refer to that just to make sure that you're not breaking any of these copyright laws. But again, once you have got some files, you should then be able to store them on your computer. And I've stored them here on my computer with a folder for each of the different systems that I have got files for. So if I have a look inside here, you can see that in my Atari 2600 folder, I then have my Atari 2600 ROM dumps. So all we need to do now is to transfer these files across to the Batocera system on the Raspberry Pi SD card. Now, once we connected Batocera to the network, it actually automatically shared its hard drive with other computers on the same connection. So it uses something called a Samba network share. So if we go on to our computer and then open up your File Explorer application, and again I'm using Windows here, then in the address bar or path box, you simply need to enter in the host name or the IP address that we found on our Batocera system. Now do make sure that you add 2 backslashes in front of the host name so that your Explorer application knows that you mean a network name. Now you should now be able to see the SD card of the Raspberry Pi pop up as a share folder. Now if you open that up, inside you'll find a ROMs folder, and then inside that folder you'll find subfolders then for each of the different systems that Batocera can emulate. So all we need to do is to copy our game ROMs from our computer into the relevant folders on the SD card. So here I'm going to copy across my Atari 2600 games, and I'm going to drop them into the Atari 2600 folder. So once you've got all those copied over, that's all of our games installed. Now there is one last thing we need to do on our PC. So we will want our game collection to look great. We don't want to scroll around through text lists trying to find the games we want. We want to have images and videos so that we can see what the games actually look like. Now to get these, we'll need to set up a free account with some sort of scraper site, and the one I'm using here is Screenscraper. So if you head across to the screenscraper.fr website, all you need to do is to make an account. And again, these are free to set up. There are obviously paid options which allow you to download more and faster. But for the moment, let's just set yourself up with a free account. That'll cover us for what we need to do at the moment. So once you've set that up, make sure you make a note of your login credentials, as of course we're going to need those in a second. So jumping back across to a Raspberry Pi in Batocera, we now need to tell it to look for all of those new games that we've just copied across. So back into the settings page with our start button, and this time select Game Settings, and then Update Games Lists. So this will get Batocera to scan all of its games folders looking for the new ROM files. So if we now go back out to the main screen, you should find that there are a number of new systems listed. Again, each one that you copied ROM files across for should now be listed out here. So simply find the one that you want to have a play with and select it. And you should now find a list of games in there. But again, they're going to have default ROM cartridge images. So we haven't yet got any game art. So let's go and get that downloaded. So back into our settings page, and now we need to go down to Scraper. Inside here then, you should find a Scrape From setting, and that should be set probably to Screenscraper, but if it's not, just use the left and right D-pad buttons to change that, again until we get then to Screenscraper. After that, we can go down to Scraper Settings, and here we can set up whatever types of images we want to download. Now if you're not sure, then just leave them at the default settings. But I'm going to go down the list here, and I'm going to turn on video downloads, and this will try and get a short game video for each of the titles so that we can actually get a little preview of the gameplay. Now down at the very bottom then, you'll see the options to enter your Screenscraper login details. So just go through and enter those. So once you've got those put in, we can come back out to the Scraper page, and then we can select our Scraper filters. So we want to get the missing media files. The ignore setting can just be left as it is, and we then want to specify the systems that we want to include. So just select that, and in here then you can see check boxes for each of the systems that it knows we have, and we can either check everything, or we can just simply select specific consoles that we want to scrape. So here I'm going to select just a couple so that we can see it working a bit faster. This process can take a while, especially if you select lots of ROMs, as it is going to have to go off for each individual game and download the files and videos and so on. But once we've got that set up, we can then come back out and to our scrape options, and we can now hit the Scrape Now button. So this is going to set Batocera talking to the screenscraper.fr website, grabbing hold of images and downloading those videos. And you should then see up in the top right corner a little progress dialog appearing. So just let that run through. So once that's finished, or as you can see here, mine's nearly finished, we just need to go back up to our game settings and refresh our game lists. And now we are ready to play some games. So just simply back out of any of the settings menus until you get to your main system selection screen. And then we can go off and choose one of our consoles. So inside there, again, if you've loaded in some games, you should find a list of these, but they should now be listed with some images. And again, that just makes our whole interface that much better. The videos that we downloaded, again, here I'm using the default theme. So again, we have things called themes in Batocera which dictate how all the game information is laid out. And then this one just lists them as a sort of a matrix of the sort of screenshots. But again, I'll take you through using themes a little bit, and that's where we can start to make it look really good. So at the moment, if I want to play a game, all I have to do is to highlight it with my D-pad and then just press my south button to select it. Now Batocera comes preloaded with all the emulators, and they're all set up and ready to go. So you should see it open up an emulator and then drop you straight into the game. So once you've finished with the game, we can use a hotkey combination to exit. So again, if you set the hotkey to the select button when we first map the controller, then hold that in and then press the start button. And what that will do, that combination of button presses tells Batocera to exit from the game, and it should drop you back out to the system game selection. So congratulations, you've now got a full retro gaming system on your TV. So from here, there are a whole range of options you can start playing around with. Now, as I mentioned earlier, in the first part of this video series, I showed you how to set up arcade gaming. So if you want to play the real arcade hits from before 2000, and that pretty much is quite a few thousand arcade games, then do make sure you have a look at that video, and all you've got to do there is to just simply follow the process of finding a ROM file set and then installing those pretty much in exactly the same way as we have just done here. And then you can start playing all of those fantastic arcade hits. Now also in that video, I showed you how to set up themes in Batocera, and that lets you fine-tune the system and the game select screens to make everything look much, much better. And as I mentioned earlier there, some of those themes then allow you to preview videos, so you can find out a little bit more about the game before you then play them. One of the things of when having these big retro systems is that there literally are thousands and thousands of games for you to play and check out. So you're never quite sure what some of the games are. So having a bit more information, a little bit of a video play of the game, just lets you see whether you actually do want to have a go at that or not. So do make sure you have a look at that first video on arcade systems, just to get hold of the information on how to set up themes and so on. But for now then, obviously we've got everything set up. Just browse through your new game collection and have fun with all of these classic retro games. So I hope you found this video useful and enjoyable. Please do click that like button and don't forget to subscribe to the channel for much more retro gaming, making, console modding and electronics projects. I look forward to seeing you again very soon, and bye for now. For more games programming, electronics projects and retro gaming, please make sure you like this video, subscribe to my YouTube channel and visit my website.